Welcome to the North Group Podcast, where we explore the ideas that shape great leadership. In each episode, we share stories, insights, and strategies to help you lead with purpose and clarity.
Today, we're talking about something that carries real weight for many business owners: the decision to sell a business, and more specifically, how to steward that decision well. This episode is especially for owners who've spent decades building something meaningful. You've invested in people, you've managed money responsibly, you care deeply about what happens to your team, your customers, and the legacy of the business after you step away. Selling a business is not just a financial transaction, it's an emotional one. It's often high stakes, deeply personal, and filled with uncertainty. I'm joined today by two people who have walked alongside many owners through this exact moment. Jerry Murray and LaRon Lehman are both part of the M&A work at North Group Consultants. Between them, they bring decades of experience helping owners prepare, navigate, and complete transitions that honor both value and values. Jerry and LaRon, thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks, Derek.
Great to be here, Derek.
Yeah, before we get into specifics, I want to ground this conversation around why North Group even does M&A work. Jerry, I'll start with you.
Okay.
Why would a firm like North Group, known for organizational health, leadership, and culture, choose to provide M&A services? What's the heart behind that?
Yeah, I love it. There is a heart behind it. You know, North Group is built on some foundational beliefs, but one of them is this grand perspective that every individual was created by God with potential, with gifts, and with the ability to use those gifts towards something productive and something that can impact others. And we believe that communities are healthy when organizations are healthy, when those individuals are able to grow towards their potential within the context and framework of an organization. And so we have developed a firm of people that are about walking with leaders and individuals in those organizations as they grow through the entire life cycle of a business. And that life cycle can start at infancy and inception, certainly go through development and growth, and through that become opportunities for transitions. And they can be leadership transitions or eventually ownership transitions. And what we've found, and what's absolutely true, is when there are transitions, leadership transitions and ownership transitions, organizations are particularly vulnerable to be challenged in that health that sustains them. And so we can think of no more important place where we would want to walk alongside leaders than when they're facing those transitions.
That's good. And LaRon, from your perspective, what qualifies North Group, do you think, to do this work well? And who is this work actually for?
Yeah, I would echo everything Jerry said. And I think in many ways that approach is what qualifies us. There's sort of an obvious level of technical ability around understanding how deals work, valuation, structure, documentation. In many ways, those are table stakes, and that's just a given. I think where we would feel like we're different and what differentiates us is that we care so deeply about the people, about our clients, and believe that businesses being part of the community is what makes the community strong, kind of what Jerry said. And so I think where we fit best, and who is it for? It would be for the business owner that cares about what they've built, they care about their community, have a deeply held sense of values, care about their legacy, their team, and they're looking for consistency with those values even as they transition out, as they look for a buyer. How can I figure out a way to carry on what I started here? And it's not that they don't care about money, but they also care about these other things. And so that would be a core part of our approach. And I think a core differentiator and who we think and why we think we fit with the kind of clients we're serving.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about the emotional reality of selling. You know, one thing that came up in our prep conversations is just how emotional this process can be. It's often more emotional than even owners expect. What emotions tend to surface most often for owners considering selling? And what makes this such a high-stake moment for them?
Yeah, I can jump in on some of the emotions. The good emotions are hope, optimism. Hey, we've reached this place in our career or in our business life cycle where we're ready for this transition. Maybe we feel valued, like we've seen something that has developed value and we feel really good. But on the other side, there are some feelings of anxiety. How is this going to go? This isn't something that we do every day. We do something else. We might do this one time. There's a feeling of loneliness, of, oh my goodness, nobody else is facing this but me right now, and I want to get this right. And I certainly could use some help in not carrying that alone. And then, some transactions can get a little twisted, and then you might feel a sense of regret or of feeling disrespect or vulnerable because someone's looking into all your records and having a different assessment of what's true than what you've always felt. And so if you look at the emotion wheel, you can see dots all over that, just depending on where you are in the process, whether you're doing it alone, what type of potential partner is on the other side of the transaction, and the professionals that you're working with.
Yeah. What does it look like through that process? I can imagine it's emotional, like you said. How do you actually help a client carry those emotions?
It's certainly a real roller coaster. And I think because we actually do care, it makes it easier to have those conversations. We typically enter with a fairly high level of trust and hopefully engender that even more as we go. And so part of our sort of standard way of thinking would be to have conversations around, what's happening, how do you feel about this, and hopefully be able to anticipate some of that. It's not completely predictable, but in some ways we know it's a roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
We know people are going to wonder, is this the right thing? We know they're going to feel very vulnerable. These are very high stakes, unknown, uncertain, often real money, sometimes very large sums of money involved. And all these things put together create this sort of perfect storm of an emotional roller coaster. And so just being there, being able to speak confidentially, being able to ask questions, being able to sometimes talk somebody off the ledge or normalize certain things that feel really bizarre to them, but in reality are pretty common in the process. So just having a trusted advisor by their side really goes a long way to just calming things, normalizing things, and helping them feel better. Doesn't solve all the problems, but it goes a long way.
Laurent described exactly what I feel when I'm walking with a client in this area. If I could use a different term, it would just be to shepherd. It feels all encompassing. Shepherds, they lead, they bring confidence that we know where we're going to go and we're going to help you to get there. We can anticipate what you're going to experience. We can bring clarity to you on what you might experience. And that way you're not going to be surprised or something isn't going to happen to you, but we are going to walk through this together. So they lead, they protect. We certainly have protective instincts for our client. We believe in the context of the type of deals that we often work with, and based on the goals of our clients, we're looking for win-win transactions. So, but we always maintain a protective instinct for our clients. And certainly we want to protect them too. This idea of the emotional roller coaster, we recognize it's unique. While we're working with professionals and experts and the highest caliber people in their field, this isn't something they've probably done before. And so we would view ourselves as emotional shock absorbers. I've told this story before, but I remember visiting Laurent when he worked for a different organization in Niger, in Central Africa, or maybe be Western Africa. And he spoke French and I didn't. And I felt like I needed Laurent to be by my side wherever I went, or I felt a strong sense of anxiety. And it's not that our clients would feel that level of anxiety, but we want to view ourselves in that way, that we want to go before them. We want to let them know what they're going to expect. We don't want them to be in a position where they feel like they're isolated on an island or something's happening to them.
Yeah. I really like that idea of just, you're not alone. You've walked this path with other people before. And I think that just can give confidence. There's going to be all kinds of emotions, but at the same time, you might not be as surprised about them as the clients as they walk through it. I want to talk also about not just the emotional readiness of a business owner, but having the business itself be ready. One of the most important ideas we want listeners to walk away with is selling starts long before you sell. How does an owner know if their business is actually ready to sell? What needs to be true operationally, culturally, financially?
Yeah, this really has nothing to do with selling a business, but I would say just as humans, when we move towards something big, we often want to get it over with. And so if we see something in front of us, we might be tempted to check that box. I'm thinking of my daughter. She lives outside this area, so this does not incriminate anyone in our viewing audience. But she was moving towards buying a home, and she had a realtor that suggested she use a particular mortgage agent. And this mortgage broker said, "Hey, I've got the document. I need you to sign it. You need you to sign it today." So there was urgency. And she said, "Hey, Dad, we need to sign this, but if you have a couple minutes, could you look at it really quickly?" And I'm so glad she did, because the mortgage rate that she was asked to sign was an entire percentage point higher than what the market rate was at that time. And we were able to put a pause on that, do a little bit more homework, and sign for a mortgage that essentially is going to save her $50,000 over the life of the mortgage. But out of urgency and being in an uncomfortable situation, she wanted to move quickly. And so what we would find in a very similar way with owners wanting to sell their business is it's an awkward time. It feels really uncomfortable. They want it to be a confidential transaction. They want to look towards the end of the transaction, and there are hard things to do in terms of providing a lot of data, walking through a legal process. And yet the very best thing to do is slow down and assess where you are at the beginning. And so you want to think, what do I believe the value is of my organization today? Is it going to sustain value if I'm not there? In other words, are my leaders prepared to continue to serve beyond me? Is there infrastructure there in the way of equipment or a team that is going to be there for multiple years that might sustain value? What type of buyer would I feel comfortable and confident in trusting this business to? Is my mission, the values of our organization entrenched in a healthy way that I believe that the legacy of this organization is going to sustain the transition? And this is just a good process to stop and assess where we are, and then we can define whether the business is ready.
Yeah.
There are a few things that maybe aren't totally intuitive in terms of is the business ready, what drives value. Mostly, though, the challenge becomes there's a certain bias or almost blindness from a business owner who has put their blood, sweat, and tears in it, that they tend to overlook things that are readily apparent to a buyer or to an outsider. More people have sold homes than have sold businesses. So a good analogy would be, if you're selling a home, you're much more critical if you're going into a home looking to buy it than if it's your home and you've lived there, because this is perfect for it. Look at the memories we have here. This is so special. And somebody else might hate the carpet or the paint color or the kitchen or the bathrooms need updated. And all of those things create in them, well, I don't think it's worth that much because we have to do all these things to fix it up. Often a buyer will come in and say, but I'm going to have to do all these things to fix it up. So if we can look at our business and say, how is our leadership beyond me? Do we have some bench strength in the organization? Do we have systems and processes in place? Are we growing? Are our margins good? How do we compare to others in our industry? All the things that a buyer would look at. When you think about it objectively, it's fairly intuitive. It's just hard to look at our own business objectively. And so having an outsider, and this, we often would go through some analysis and try to adjust expectations accordingly. But thinking about it and looking at it objectively to really determine what's somebody else going to think of it is pretty important.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about this in a while, but I can remember my sister and I, so my grandparents had passed away, and we had done an estate sale auction, and people were coming through the house and buying things and bidding on things. And I remember my sister and I just had to walk away because they would look at things and they make comments, or it was not quite getting the kind of money that we thought it should get. And I just remember my sister and I just had to go for a little walk. We couldn't kind of be in the room as people were putting value on these things that for us were so valuable. There's just a lot of emotions I hadn't even thought about surfacing that day around that. And it's the same, like you're saying, I can see that, you're so invested, and now people are going to come and they're going to start talking about, what
Yeah.
that's going to mean to them or what the cost
It's the same. We've all heard it about telling somebody their baby's ugly. That's the feeling you get. If people are critical of your business, that's your baby.
Yeah.
And when people are critical of it or don't ascribe the same value that you ascribe, that's sometimes tough to hear. And it's part of the emotional roller coaster I talked about.
And Derek, who we know is the buyers have emotions too, or the potential buyers. And so, they're concerned. What am I missing? What could go wrong here? If, have we asked all the right questions? We don't want to make too positive assumptions, or else, we might borrow money and not live up to the cash flow expectations that are enable us to pay off that debt. And so they're not doing that to harm the seller or to insult the seller, but it's just a natural thought pattern for the buyer too. And we look for ways to communicate that to the seller, but also to maintain as much trust as we can from the very start, so that the buyers believe that any new information that comes is going to be even better than what they think.
Yeah. I know we've already hit on this a little bit with when we just talked about emotions in general, but as we think about the business readiness, now there is ownership readiness. How does an owner know if he or she is ready? And what questions should they be asking themselves?
It's a really difficult one. There's some research and statistics that indicate 75% of business owners regret selling their company within 1 year. And it's typically for the reasons we're talking about around emotions, identity, purpose. We all get wrapped up in what we do. We're associated with the work we do. We spend a lot of our time there. Naturally, we get wrapped up in it. It becomes part of our identity. And becomes a challenge to separate that. And when that's gone and a business owner is no longer the business owner, he can't rely on that as part of his identity or her identity. What's my purpose? What do I do? It's easy to feel a little bit lost. And so in some ways you can prepare for that. In other ways, you can't fully prepare because you don't know quite how that's going to feel until it feels that way. So I think our role is to make sure that folks are taking it serious, to think about it, to contemplate it. If there's time and early on in the process, as we think about the future with a business owner or a client, I sometimes encourage people that you should take a sabbatical for 6 weeks or 2 months or 3 months. Just try it on and see how it feels. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes people get the shakes, like this isn't working for me. But it starts to give you a glimpse of what it might feel like to not have something to do all day. And then you can start to process that and work through it and try to identify what are some other things that give me purpose, or how do I think about my own identity beyond this business? But it is a challenge and it's a significant one.
That identity piece is huge. And that one probably takes the most time, and it's the hardest one to answer. But practicing, I love that idea of practicing some other more basic ways that owners can evaluate their personal readiness is just understanding what value from the business they might need to help them to have the financial future that they either need or want, just to understand that piece well. They'd want to look at their team of leaders who they would be leaving with the business, and just seeing that they've been prepared to own customer relationships and the technical responsibilities and administrative responsibilities of leading the business, and be confident that they're going to lead well. I think to some extent they need to ask themselves, and this parallels the meaning question, would they be able to see someone else lead and govern this business and do so without judgment or regret? And that's really hard when this has been your thing for so long. The only other thing I'd want to say about this is we're talking about owners as if there's one. When an organization is owned by multiple owners, and they could be family or maybe they're not family, it is really important for that group of owners to come together and agree to the timing of a transaction, their goals in the transaction, the purpose of a transaction. Because again, when we think about doing a healthy transaction and being a healthy organization, we want there to be one voice, one purpose, one common commitment to how we answer questions. Because on the other side is a buyer who is regularly assessing, okay, do I trust this process? Can I receive this answer and believe this is their final answer, or might this change depending on my willingness to either pay a certain amount or offer certain terms or commit to a certain approach. And so when there are multiple owners, that would be another step in the process, is to make sure those owners are fully aligned and they're using one voice to make their commitments.
Yeah, that's good.
Sticking with this theme of readiness, just kind of summarize some of what we've been talking about. A good framework is to think about it in 3 different areas. Business, is the business ready? Personal, am I ready personally? And financially, are we ready? So business, we talked about, is it healthy? Is it growing? Is it independent of the owner? Can it actually be transferred to a new owner? Is it healthy financially, but culturally, et cetera? Personally, emotionally, do I know what's next? Have I dealt with what's going on emotionally? Have I talked about it with my advisors and my family? And financially, do I understand the value of the business, what drives value, and is that value sufficient to meet my needs personally as I think about moving on to what's next? And so there's a lot baked into those 3 stools, but that pretty well covers the readiness aspect of, is the business ready? Am I ready? Do I have the numbers checked? If so, let's start exploring it.
Yeah, let's talk about value. Obviously, value matters in a sale, but it's not the only thing that matters. How should owners think about value in the context of legacy? And where do even core values come into play in the M&A process?
So I think this is one of the things that perhaps more than other advisors in this space that we take pretty seriously and want to spend some time on. And largely because that's also what our clients care about and want to spend time on. But there's a real alignment there. And I think we would say strongly that, yes, the value, the economic value and the money matters. But ultimately, there's deeper and more lasting satisfaction out of knowing that you exited the right way, that you put your business in good hands, and also got paid fairly for it. And so thinking clearly about, why did we build this business? Why did we start it in the first place? What are the things that drive us now? And what do we care about beyond us, so that you can build a profile or some expectations around the kind of buyer that we would be pleased with and that we think is right for the organization. We've all heard the stories, and it's easy to vilify private equity. It's not always the case, but they're usually the ones that come up of, they destroyed my company, they dismantled my culture, it all became about the money or cost cutting. And certainly that's not always true, but it can happen, and it can happen with other buyers as well. And if those are the things you care about, let's optimize for the right kind of buyer that is going to carry on what you said and also value it in a fair way. And so I think for the way we would think about it, these issues are central to the conversation and how we want to proceed.
I agree 100% with everything Laurent said.
Yeah.
Value matters. It certainly matters. And we want to establish an understanding, but we want to listen well to our clients to understand what their absolute priorities are in a transaction and in a buyer. And then we want to mine for a buyer that matches what their goals are, understanding that value could be different depending on what type of buyer is. A financial buyer might be willing to pay a certain amount, a strategic buyer another amount. A relative or a friend or a chosen individual for certain reasons, still a different either amount or set of terms. But it really is about understanding what our client wants, what they prioritize, and then following through.
Another way to think about it is, if you compare different types of buyers, there's not necessarily right or wrong, but there are trade-offs. And so being fully informed about the trade-offs you're making and the implications of those decisions is great. It's not a right or wrong, black or white situation, but you have to weigh the options and exercise judgment, and being clear on your values really helps get clarity on those decisions.
We have seen organizations successfully sell to private equity sell to individuals and sell to other organizations, all with a purpose that met the priorities of the seller.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more. We've already mentioned some of this, but just to be as clear as we can, North Group often talks about loving to sell healthy organizations. Why is that so important, for the owner, for the buyer, and for the people who stay?
Well, one reason is healthy organizations are attractive. And so it creates options in the selling process, and it helps us to find a buyer, or a pool of buyers from which to choose from. And that's just good for a lot of different reasons. It's good for, generating as much value as we can, but also being able to decide who we feel like in the mix is really going to match our culture and who's going to lead well and preserve legacy if that's one of our priorities. I think the other reason, though, is healthy organizations exude trust and credibility. There's often one voice. We can count on them to do what they say they're going to do. Decisions move quickly, and they're able to deliver information. They most likely have systems of data that are able to deliver what we're asking for. And if I haven't said it already, it's worth repeating that trust, I believe, is the number one currency in transaction completion. It accelerates transactions. It gives confidence to buyers. It gives confidence to sellers. And we want to do everything we can to generate trust from the very first step in the process of selling a business. And healthy organizations set us up to do that from the very first step.
Yeah. Small, medium-sized organizations are difficult to sell, to find a buyer for. We hear about the successes, and we all know people that have sold their companies. You hear far less about the companies that don't sell, or that sell under some unfavorable terms, or that are not very attractive. But those are perhaps more common. And those are typically the ones that are less healthy, are not as attractive to a buyer, have a lot more risk on them, and they're just difficult to transfer to a new set of owners. And so healthy businesses increase the odds dramatically. And so if you have time, it's in your best interest to build it to a healthy place and then sell it, rather than feel like, well, I've lost the energy and here we are, I guess I have to unload it. That's not in your best interest often. And so, yeah, health just facilitates easier process and better valuation.
Yeah, it reminds me, we said earlier, selling well starts long before you sell. Right. And so this is where building a healthy organization would be a key, for sure.
That's right.
Hey, let's talk about practical next steps. If someone listening today who has built something meaningful and is quietly wondering, what does this next chapter look like? What would you tell them to do next?
Yeah, I think to go back to what we were talking about, I think evaluating and assessing readiness of your business, readiness of yourself financially, readiness of yourself emotionally. Those are the areas to, do a gap analysis or pick some other terminology that makes sense. Just identify, am I ready? And if I'm not ready, what's it going to take to get there? And then start methodically working through those things, processing things, putting new things in place. Maybe that means a key hire, could mean a variety of things. But assessing readiness is a really great place to start.
That's exactly what I would say. And maybe encourage them to talk to someone that's been through this process. And I'm sure they know someone. If they'd like any recommendations, we certainly could offer some references too, as to some other business owners who have sold and to have experienced everything that we've talked about today.
Yeah, well, as we wrap up, here's what I'm taking away, or what I think we hope you would take away. Selling a business doesn't have to feel overwhelming or isolating. There is a path you can be confident in, and you don't have to walk it alone. At North Group, as we've heard, we care deeply about helping owners steward what they've built so that the next chapter is healthy, thoughtful, and aligned with the legacy that they want to leave. So Jerry and LaRon, in one or two sentences, how would you sum up what you're hoping owners would take away from this conversation?
I think my sense is, with some thoughtful preparation, selling your business can be very satisfying and rewarding. Yes, there's some challenges and there's some emotions, but it really should be a very satisfying and rewarding process, and it can be.
Yeah, it's the same exact theme. There is a path to a business sale where all parties win, and it feels great for the seller, the employees, customers, and the buyer as well. And it is worth taking the time to walk that path.
Yeah, good. Well, thanks for listening to the North Group podcast. If this conversation resonates with you, we'd encourage you to reach out and start a conversation. Preparation begins long before a transaction, and the earlier you start, the better the outcome. Thanks again, Jerry and Laurent.
Yeah, thank you.